Here's what nobody tells you about hard seasons. They don't test your skill first. They test your identity. They ask you over and over, are you really the person who keeps going? Or were you just lucky before? Elias started losing people during this season. Friends who didn't understand why he wasn't just getting a normal job. Already, a relationship that ended because she said she fell in love with a man who had direction, not a man covered in sawdust with no income. He started eating one meal a day to save money, not for a cause, not for health, because the math simply didn't allow for more. And on that particular Tuesday night, the 14th failed piece sat in front of him. A bookshelf. The joints didn't hold. The whole structure leaned like it was embarrassed to even exist. He sat on the floor of his garage in the cold, and for the first time in 3 years, he let himself ask the real question. What if I quit? He pictured it. Packing the tools away, getting a job folding shirts somewhere. Predictable hours. Predictable paycheck. No more humiliation of failed builds. No more silence from clients. No more cold garages at midnight. It would be so easy. But then his mind did something strange. It didn't show him a better future. It showed him the version of himself who quit 10 years from now, sitting in a comfortable chair, in a stable job, wondering every single day what would have happened if he had just built one more piece. That image scared him more than failure ever did. Not the failure itself, the permanent uncertainty of never knowing. He realized something that night that most people never let themselves see clearly. Quitting doesn't end the pain. It just changes its shape. Instead of the pain of trying, you carry the pain of wondering. And wondering, for the rest of your life, is heavier than any failed bookshelf. So he stood up, not because he suddenly believed in himself, not because the universe sent him a sign. He stood up because the alternative, sitting there forever, was worse than trying again. He picked up the broken bookshelf. He studied where the joints failed, not with shame this time, but with curiosity. Like a scientist instead of a victim, he found the flaw. A measurement off by less than 2 millimeters. 2 millimeters had cost him 3 days of work and a sleepless night. He fixed it, rebuilt the joint, reinforced it the way he should have from the start. It held. It wasn't perfect. The finish still needed work. But for the first time, it held. There's a moment, right before you give up, where your body already knows the truth your mind hasn't accepted yet. It's the moment your hands stop shaking from fear and start shaking from exhaustion. It's the moment silence stops feeling peaceful and starts feeling like punishment. That moment came for a man named Elias on a Tuesday night, in a cold garage at 11:47 p.m., when he sat on the concrete floor, next to a machine that had failed him for the 14th time. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just sat there, staring at his own hands, and asked himself one question. What if I'm not built for this? Stay with me, because what happened next didn't just change his life. It changed the way he understood the word quit forever. 3 years earlier, Elias had a normal life, a steady job, a small apartment, a routine so predictable he could tell you what day it was just by what he had for dinner. Then the company he worked for collapsed overnight. No warning, no severance, just an email at 6 a.m. telling 400 people they no longer had jobs. Elias remembers standing in his kitchen, reading that email 3 times, waiting for the words to change. They didn't. For the first few weeks, he told himself it was temporary, a setback, the kind of story you laugh about later at dinner parties. But weeks turned into months, and the savings account that once felt solid started shrinking like ice in the sun. He applied for over 200 jobs. He got 4 interviews, 0 offers. Somewhere in that silence, something in him decided to stop waiting for someone else to hand him a future. He'd build one with his own hands, even if he didn't know how yet. He'd always loved working with metal and wood, ever since he was a kid fixing broken furniture in his father's garage. So he made a decision that sounded reckless to everyone who heard it. He was going to build custom furniture, not for a store, not for a boss, for himself. He spent his last bit of savings on basic tools. He turned his garage into a workshop, and he taught himself everything from videos, forums, and trial and error that cost him blood, time, and pride. The first table he built collapsed the moment he set a cup on it. The second one had legs that didn't match. The third one looked decent until a client pointed out the finish was uneven, peeling within a week. Each failure came with the same whisper in his head. Maybe you're just not good at this. But each morning, he walked back into that garage anyway. That one small fix didn't change his bank account. It didn't bring back his ex. It didn't repair the relationships he lost along the way. But it changed something inside him that mattered more than any of that. It proved that the failures weren't evidence he should quit. They were data, information. Each one was actually moving him closer, not further, from the version of himself who knew what he was doing. 6 months later, a small furniture studio in his town saw photos of his work online and offered him a contract. Not because his story was perfect, because his craftsmanship, sharpened by every single failure, had finally become undeniable. 3 years after that bookshelf, Elias stood in his own studio. Not a garage anymore. A real space with real clients. And a small team of 2 people who once worked for him part-time. People look at his work now and call it talent. He knows better. Talent didn't build that bookshelf. Stubbornness did. The simple, unglamorous decision to stand up one more time than he wanted to sit down. If you're in your own cold garage tonight, staring at something that's failed for the 14th time, here is what Elias would tell you. The breakthrough was never going to feel like motivation. It was always going to feel like exhaustion that decided to take one more step anyway. You don't need to feel ready. You don't need to feel strong. You just need to stand back up, walk over to whatever broke, and look at it with curiosity instead of shame. Because the difference between the people who make it and the people who don't was never talent. It was always just one more step.